There is a hidden key buried inside a March 2026 Windows update that most people installed without a second thought. It is sitting quietly on hundreds of millions of PCs right now. It is called Identity Verify, and it lives inside the Windows Login UI, the core system responsible for logins, lock screens, credential handling, and administrator prompts. Microsoft did not announce it publicly. No press release, no warning, no prompt asking users for consent. It was quietly added during a routine cumulative update alongside AI patches and bug fixes, and that should concern every Windows user, not because of what it fully does today, but because of what it reveals about where Windows is heading next. Because this is not an isolated feature. It is part of a much larger shift happening across the entire tech industry, a shift toward identity-linked computing, mandatory online verification, and operating systems that increasingly treat users less like owners and more like authenticated participants inside a controlled ecosystem. The details matter here. Researchers who analyzed the March 2026 update discovered registry keys connected to age verification infrastructure inside the Login UI subsystem. This is important because Login UI is not some random background component. It sits at the deepest level of Windows authentication. When Microsoft places verification infrastructure there, it means they are preparing for system-wide identity enforcement. According to the discovered controls, the feature activates when a user attempts to run software with administrator privileges. The system can request an ID scan and a facial scan before allowing the action. Researchers found two security modes. The lower mode could reportedly be bypassed using generated IDs or AI-generated images. The higher mode required a real government-issued ID and live face verification. Think about that for a second. To run software as administrator on your own computer, Microsoft could potentially require you to scan your face and upload government identification. Not for banking, not for taxes, not for government services, for your own PC. Now, to be fair and accurate, as of May 2026, Microsoft has not enforced this globally. The infrastructure exists, the keys are present, and the framework appears functional, but the company has not officially enabled broad mandatory rollout. But this follows a pattern Microsoft has used before. Quietly build the infrastructure first, normalize it in the background, and activate enforcement later. The bigger question is why Microsoft is building this at all, and the answer is legislation. Over the past 2 years, governments across the United States have pushed aggressively for online age verification laws. More than half of U.S. states now have some form of age verification requirement tied to online services, particularly adult content platforms. But the real turning point came in late 2025. California passed the Digital Age Assurance Act, a law requiring operating system providers to collect age information during account setup and provide age-related signals to apps. The law takes effect January 1st, 2027. And because California's economy is so massive, companies effectively treat California regulations as nationwide requirements. For Microsoft, complying with these laws becomes far easier if every Windows user is tied to a Microsoft account connected to verified identity data. That explains why Microsoft has spent years pushing users away from local accounts. In 2025, Microsoft removed nearly every known workaround that allowed Windows users to bypass the mandatory Microsoft account requirement during installation. Older Windows setups allowed offline installation and local-only accounts. Newer versions increasingly require internet access and cloud authentication before the operating system can even be used. Microsoft officially claimed this was about improving setup quality and ensuring devices are fully configured. But critics argue the real goal is obvious: identity-linked computing, because local accounts limit Microsoft's visibility. A local account does not automatically connect your device activity, telemetry, app usage, BitLocker keys, and personal identity into one centralized cloud profile. A Microsoft account does. That distinction becomes critically important once age verification enters the operating system itself. If laws eventually require verified age checks at the OS level, Microsoft already has the infrastructure ready: cloud accounts, birth dates, device identities, TPM hardware verification, and now potentially biometric verification inside Windows itself. At the same time, Microsoft users have already experienced how fragile these systems can become. In late 2025 and early 2026, reports flooded Microsoft support forums from users suddenly locked out of accounts after being flagged as minors. Some teenagers lost access to long-established Outlook accounts and were forced into parental consent verification systems. Even adults were accidentally flagged due to incorrect birth dates in Microsoft systems. And fixing those mistakes was often extremely difficult. Some users reportedly needed another adult Microsoft account to act as a guardian just to correct account information. Microsoft's own policies also warn that if parental verification was not completed, accounts could eventually be deleted permanently. That means email, cloud files, and years of personal data could vanish because of an automated age verification dispute. This is exactly why privacy advocates are sounding alarms. Organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation argue that age verification systems inevitably become surveillance systems, because proving age usually requires collecting sensitive identity data. And once companies collect that data, it creates enormous risks. Recent years have already shown repeated examples of verification systems leaking sensitive information, government IDs stolen from third-party verification vendors, facial scan databases exposed online, selfie verification systems breached. And unlike passwords, biometric data cannot simply be changed after a leak. You can replace a password, you cannot replace your face. Critics also point out something deeply ironic about this entire situation. Many of the laws pushing this infrastructure still rely largely on self-reported birthdays. In other words, governments are encouraging tech companies to build massive identity verification systems, even when the actual laws themselves often do not require face scans or biometric enforcement. But Microsoft and other tech companies are clearly preparing for where regulations may go next. Today, the law asks for age information. Tomorrow, it may require verified ID. Later, it may require biometrics. Once the infrastructure already exists inside the operating system, expanding enforcement becomes much easier. That is the part many users are missing. Identity Verify is not just a feature, it is infrastructure. The mandatory Microsoft account push is not separate from this story. The removal of local accounts is not separate from this story. The TPM requirements are not separate from this story. The cloud-connected Windows ecosystem is not separate from this story. These are all pieces of the same long-term transition toward identity-centered computing. A future where your operating system increasingly knows who you are, how old you are, what apps you run, what hardware you use, and potentially whether you are authorized to perform certain actions on your own machine. And that raises a fundamental question every Windows user should think about carefully. What does ownership actually mean in 2026? Because you may own the hardware sitting on your desk, but the software increasingly requires online authentication, cloud-connected identity, and potentially biometric verification just to unlock full functionality. The local account, the last major way to use Windows without tying yourself directly to Microsoft's cloud identity systems, is slowly disappearing. And once anonymous computing disappears, getting it back becomes incredibly difficult. The Identity Verify infrastructure is already inside Windows. California's law activates in January 2027. Federal proposals are already being discussed. The technology is being built now. The only remaining question is how far Microsoft and governments eventually decide to take it.